Hey, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason. As I mentioned before, I've been a longtime listener of the podcast, and I've actually gone through a few years back your agency playbook training. And, I can attribute a lot of my success to listening to the podcast and learning from what you've taught me. So thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to have you on and happy to, have helped you out with the podcast and through the agency playbook framework. So that's awesome. You just make me feel old because I've been doing this for like 11 years now, which is crazy. Like we're almost, I think we're right at over 800 episodes now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're like 802 or 803 or something like that.
Yeah,
It's amazing. I've
it's
probably
crazy.
listened to 500 of those episodes
Oh
over the
gosh.
years.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate it. But tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Eric Baum. I'm the CEO and founder of Bluleadz. So Bluleadz is a HubSpot onboarding and implementation agency. We help customers to transform the way they market, sell, and service their customers utilizing the HubSpot platform. Right. So think of it as like somebody gets on the HubSpot platform. We help them get set up and implement it and train their team on how to utilize it, help them to grow their company, and also reduce the time it takes to get positive ROI from utilizing the HubSpot platform.
Amazing. Awesome. And how did you get started? Was this by accident or?
Yeah, so I am an accidental agency owner, as you often say. I owned three other businesses at the time. Actually, it was two other businesses, and I got into the agency world because I needed to market those other two service businesses. Back then, this was 16 years ago. I was advertising in the yellow pages back then. Switched, hired somebody internally to do digital marketing for us, create our own website, do PPC, SEO, and that pivoted. And then I immediately, all the other franchise owners, which I knew across the country for the particular franchises that I owned, they were like, "How'd you do it?" And so I took that person, moved them into a new agency, and I had like 50 customers out of the gate. And as so many times that I've learned in listening to your podcast, it was like I was charging way too low at that point. This was 15, 16 years ago, let's call it. I was charging like $250, $500 a month as retainers. It was insane. I don't know how I didn't go broke right out of the gate.
Well, I think we think too small in the very beginning. And for a while, honestly, right? Because we start looking at it going, and what if I could just replace my salary at this part? And then maybe that was like $3,000 or $5,000 a month. And then you're just like, oh, well, if I get, 10 clients at 500 a month, I replace that. And then I have total freedom, right? That's what we think. But I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, no. You created a prison that you have to work 24/7.
Yeah. Well, I've been a study of the game over the last 15 years. So we reincorporated Bluleadz when we found HubSpot 15 years ago, and we became a HubSpot certified partner back then. We rebranded as Bluleadz. And from that point forward, I really kind of studied the game and understood, hey, if I really want to make a go at this, what do I need to do to be profitable? What do I need to do to make sure that I can take care of my team, but I also don't want to be the person servicing and selling and doing all the work all the time. And here I am 15 years later, and I've finally figured out that piece of the puzzle, which makes life really enjoyable as an agency owner.
So, what right now, I want to talk about, you're very close to the 8-figure mark, and your goal is to get to the 100 million mark, and not to just get there and sell it and kind of retire, but, talk about what's what's the road been like getting to where you're at now? What surprised you along the way?
Yeah. So I think the biggest surprise along the way was there's no hockey stick that's just up to the right, like you see in many of the software companies today, right? The unicorns. At least for me as an agency owner, I got stuck for years in what you refer to as no man's land, right? In that, for me, it was that 1 million to 5 million in revenue phase where it was like up and down and up and down. I get more revenue or I'd lose employees. And it was just this seesaw of like I'd incrementally grow and then grow fast. And then, the next year I'd go backwards and like, what are we doing wrong? And it took me a little while to kind of figure things out. About almost 9 years ago, we implemented EOS, so the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You've heard it a number of times
Many
on your
members use it.
podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. So like, once we did that, we kind of got this structure of, hey, what are the basic things we should be doing to make sure that we've got a solid foundation for the agency? And that kind of set the stage for us. But there was years where I'm like, what am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? Right? How do I learn from this?
Yeah. What what's the big struggle now, right? Like you're about to, hopefully in the next couple of years get to the 8-figure mark. And then what do you think the big struggle from that part to the 100 million will be?
The biggest thing now is cash flow. Believe it or not, like even where we're at, it's to grow as fast as I want to. I need a lot more cash to be able to do that.
Okay.
And so, in the agency world, as you grow, you sometimes you can grow faster than what you can afford to grow, which sounds counterintuitive. But you get into that position where you're growing so fast and your receivables are building up. And so you can't invest in new departments and invest in new ideas without making sure that you've got the cash reserves in place to hit the downturns, right? So, perfect example is obviously COVID. But for us recently, it's the beginning of this year, right? The first 3 months of this year, we were down 20% compared to last year at this time because of all the uncertainty. And so we had the cash reserves in place to be able to weather that storm and not freak out. But, also without outside investment, I've got to make sure that I can take care of the team, that I can take care of my family, and be able to still invest in growth. So when we get to that next stage, my problems might be different, but for right now, I'm constantly looking at cash flow.
So what are your payment terms with your clients?
And so it depends. Like, this kind of goes into, we made a pivot a few years back. So we do have retainers, clients, like a traditional agency. We call it managed services. So it's HubSpot support. We don't actually do like marketing retainers for clients, but most of the time it's project work, right? Which is counterintuitive to the typical agency owner. So our payment terms are typically like half down and then 25% and 25%, or like 100% up front, depending on the size of the project and the timeline of the project, right? So we have good cash flow in that respect.
The 25%, the 25%, is that based on deliverables?
So it can be, most of the time it's a milestone. So for us, let's just say a project is, a 3-month HubSpot onboarding and implementation project, 50% down, 25% at the end of month 1, and then 25%, say, halfway through the second month, or at the end
So
of
it is
second month.
big specific though.
Yeah. So it's not, we got away from like the deliverable based
Yeah.
terms, just because it's so difficult to control, and I want to
Well,
make
you're
sure
always
that we've got,
waiting. You're always waiting on
and
the clients.
so that's been, you bring up a good point there. So one of the things that we've decided, like that we made the change internally for our terms of service and also our payment terms, was because of that, because we're waiting on the client for so many things throughout the process. So now we're not really worried about, hey, if the client needs to take 4 months to get this project done that we scoped out for 2 months, that's okay with us. We just need to build that in, but we're getting paid as a result of our terms of service, right?
Yeah, one of the things I learned very well, it took me a while, honestly, right? Like we used to do like 50% up front, 50% at the end. And we would always go, oh, the project, because we were 80% projects. And we would be like, all right, we get all this money up front, 50%, but then we're always waiting on the client. Even the client, and especially the clients that were like, we'll be your best client. I'm like, oh, bullshit, right? You're going to be my worst client. And then I was like, after we got burned so much, we finally implemented, we're like, we're going to do 50% up front, a quarter halfway through the project or at a certain date, whichever comes first based on their timeline. And then a quarter or the other quarter was always on a date or completion, whichever comes first. So a lot of
Yeah.
times we were paid 100% before we were even done. And one of the funny stories that I think I've mentioned on the podcast maybe once or twice, we had a client that developed these double-sided lounge chairs, right? Because they're too fucking lazy to turn them around. Like they just want to lay around all day, right? This is how they came up with it. This should tell you how long, right? Like this should have been a red flag. So eventually they paid us 100%. And then 4 years later, I sold the agency. And then 4 years later, I think, in my time, it's been so long. 4 years later, I think it was over an 8-year span. They finally reached out. It was like, hey, Jason, we're ready. We got everything we need.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I mean, so what do you do at that point?
Well, I told him, I was like, we've been sold twice. Contact them. I'm not in it anymore.
Yeah, that's classic.
Like I was already like probably 2 years into this doing the podcast. So
yeah, so we've had similar cases. We've tried to curtail that over the years. We still have some cases where it's the same situation as you. It's like, hey, we've been paid 100%, but 2 or 3 months later, they finally get their act together and they need XYZ done. And we go back in, obviously, and finish the project. But that can be frustrating for the implementation team because they've got this hanging chad out there that they don't know when. And invariably, the customer comes back to you and says, hey, I need this done this week. And it's like 3 months later. Right?
Well, one of the things that we did, and I'm going to tell everybody to do as well, we would always have a restart fee, and we would always be upfront with them. And we never buried any of our payment terms in like the small print either. I will always very upfront with them. Hey, this is how we do the payment terms, but it shouldn't be an issue because you said you're going to get me everything you need or I need on time. And they're like, yes, of course. And if they kind of like stumbled a little bit, I'm like, well, so are you not? Like, do I really want to take you on as a client? And the red flags would go up. But what we would do is we'd say, here's based on the timeline. And then we're going to constantly let you know when we need stuff. And if it goes too far, like if you don't respond to us in a certain amount of time, we're going to assume it's approved and we're going to move on. And then if we don't hear from you when we need, and we have to restart, like, let's say 30 days, 2 months later, you're going to have to go back in the queue. We're going to have to charge you a re-engagement fee of this, but you said you're going to be the perfect client, so there's nothing to worry. I just wanted to walk you through this.
Yeah. Yeah,
I've seen it all.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It's funny because our business is currently about 80 to 85% project work, right? So we pivoted. We were the traditional, like, hey, marketing retainer agency. We started off as a SEO, PPC, website design agency, found HubSpot, bought into the inbound marketing phase, did that for like a decade, let's call it. And then about 5 years ago, we really, and so back then, up until about 5 years ago, 85% of our revenue was retainer revenue, right? And so we had a really solid foundation. And then about 5 years ago, we pivoted to 80% project work. We pivoted to becoming a HubSpot onboarding and implementation agency. And we did that as a result of, COVID hit, but after COVID, it changed the way people were buying and the way companies were buying, at least for us. They didn't want to sign retainers anymore. They wanted more short-term project work. And so we really leaned into that. And so for us, we've got to be very careful about how we approach payment terms and dragging things out because we have so many projects now. Like we're not, the typical agency that has 50 or 100 customers on retainer. We literally go through, 50 to 75 new customers a month that we bring on board. And so those may be a 30-day project to a 3-month project. So we're dealing in high volume.
How many
Our
are
game has
repeat?
changed.
Like, do you have an ascension model where you keep moving them up to, higher things?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we've really fallen down and not done a great job of until recently. So we were just being reactive and bringing on new customers, getting them through there. And we didn't do a great job of second, third, fourth sale and then pulling them on a subscription-based model or what we call managed services, which is a retainer kind of support on the back end. We've made a huge conscious effort this year, really going into the last quarter of last year, into changing that. And so we're seeing, because when I look at like, hey, we've got thousands of past customers on board, where's the biggest opportunity for growth? And I look at, well, it's selling back into our existing customer base, right? We've done all this work. We could literally double, triple revenue inside of a year just by going and selling second, third projects back into this. And they need additional things because half the time they come back a year or two later and like, hey, we lost this team member. We don't know what we're doing in HubSpot. We need XYZ done. But if we're more proactive about that, we're able to increase the lifetime value of a customer, or average customer of value over a short period of time, just by offering them that. So we've made that kind of pivot to acting more as a software company and assigning CSM, so customer success managers, to try to identify these opportunities. Because an implementation.
Are they acting more as PMs? That's the big issue I see a lot of agencies fall into, right? They're hiring project managers or mentality of project managers. And let me define a project manager and account manager, because there's always a debate between this, right? Like,
Yeah.
I look at a project manager as get shit done, keep the timeline, right? Make sure we're, under budget, right? And the client's happy. But it's more on the agency side. The account manager is more a strategist, right? Where they're positioning the agency as an advisor to figure out their problem, their solutions, right? They're not really in the details, but it's about growing that account. Which do you have?
So we've got a third option. So we've got like the client service team. So that's just called an implementation specialist. So they're a person actually getting the work done, right?
Yep.
We've got the salesperson. So the sales account executive, that's the person that's responsible for cross-sell and upsell. And then we've got a third person, the CSM, so customer success manager, that layers on top of the client services team. And the sole responsibility of that individual is to make sure that the customer is getting value from what we're doing for them, and then to identify cross-sell and upsell opportunities and surface that to the salesperson, right? So it's an additional overhead for the agency, but it makes the customer have a customer advocate, and it frees up that person's time to like dig into a customer account and not have to like do the work and really identify where the second, third sales are. Because salespeople are dealing with new customers. They're not farmers. They're not going back, at least at our agency, they're not going back and selling back into the existing customers. I tried to change that, unsuccessful at that, and finally said, hey, let's just change the model.
Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing, because the customer doesn't really talk to the person doing the work, right?
They do. Absolutely.
They do? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the CSM, so they're in contact with the person doing the work. That's their primary contact. That would be your project manager. They're actually like dealing with a customer, doing the work for the customer. And it's, there's multiple departments that usually get involved in integrations, design, dev, content, whatever. But that implementation person is the direct point of contact with the customer, and they're doing the work. The CSM actually layers on top of that. So they've got no direct client responsibilities. They pop in occasionally on meetings, and they have that trust built between them.
How do you differentiate because I've used many agencies over the past couple of years, and I've just had not very good success because most agencies really suck at communication
Yeah.
and fusion, right? Like, and I'm like, who do I contact? And I heard that a great thing from one of our members, Travis. He always tells everybody, he goes, look, because we have a salesperson and an account person, and he goes, if it's like a 411, you contact your account person. If it's a 911, contact the salesperson because he's right and more incentivized to. And I love it. I was like, I'm stealing this. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So in our case, the 411 is the implementation specialist and the 911 is the CSM.
Okay. So they never really talk back to the salesperson. So do you find it hard? Like me personally, I'm just kind of looking at it with me like, and I remember when I worked for Arthur Anderson for a brief stint, we always would joke about big partners would sell the deal, right? And then the school bus would drop the kids off to do the actual work. And we would never see the partner again. Right. Like, so if a salesperson came back to me, after you sold me 6 months ago, and I'm like, well, you only call me when you want something. That's kind of how I feel. How do you guys get around that?
Yeah, so we involve the salesperson in different steps of the process for, let's say it's a 3-month project. So they're
Okay.
involved in the onboarding call with the customer, as well as like the implementation specialist and the CSM. And then they get brought in at different stages. So just call it month 1, month 2, and then when the project wraps up, on specific calls. And there's agendas on those calls to have them have an active part and talk about additional things with that the CSM has surfaced. So
Okay.
they're constantly staying in contact. But they're not wasting their time trying to dig in to the customer's account to figure out where the opportunities are. That's the CSM's job, because like we co-sell with HubSpot. That's primarily 95% of the business is we're selling with a HubSpot direct sales rep, and going to whether we're bringing that software deal to HubSpot or they're bringing it to us because the customer needs a partner to actually execute and onboard them. So our salespeople's calendars are booked solid. They're just on meetings, selling new deals, right? We've got 5 salespeople and we bring on 50 to 75 new customers a month. So they're just
Yeah.
slinging every single day on meetings. So they don't have the
That's awesome.
time to research the customer.
I want to switch focus just a little bit while we wrap up. So, especially too, what I found is when the majority of my business was project based, I had to have a healthy pipeline, and you kind of alluded to that with like 5 salespeople, right? And HubSpot brings you in. Is HubSpot bringing you most of these deals and lining it up for your salespeople to knock it down and close it, or your salespeople like do you have BDRs going out producing these leads or?
Yeah, so the model's changed. It used to be, most of our leads would come from our own inbound marketing efforts. But as we kind of went up market with HubSpot and became one of HubSpot's top partners, then HubSpot started driving the majority of our net new leads. As of today, we get about 40% from HubSpot and about 30% from our existing customer base, surfaced from our CSM departments and our implementation specialists, selling back into existing customers.
Sure.
And then about another 30%, let's call it, from our own inbound marketing efforts, other strategic partners, and word of mouth kind of thing, referrals.
I gotcha. Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, I always tell everybody, and goes back to the playbook, right? The 3 pillars: inbound, outbound, and strategic partnerships. Right? Like,
Yeah.
when you can build a really amazing partnership with, it grows. What I would tell you in order to scale even more, start looking for other partners like that. That's where you get.
We built our strategic partnership program out, and so we've got a few that are also they're app partners with HubSpot, so they're integration partners with HubSpot. But we use a software Crossbeam. You're probably familiar with them, and Reveal. They merged, which allows you to like dig into your strategic partners database of customers, prospects, and opportunities, and like see an overlay and figure out where their opportunities are. And so we've been really working on that because I think that's the way of the future, is building out
Yeah.
strategic partners, specifically for us, ones that integrate with HubSpot, because that's our main strategic partnership.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, this is awesome, Eric. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the listeners listening in?
Yeah, I think the last piece of advice I would give myself if I was listening over the years is like, let go faster, right? I've heard this a lot, but I never really took that piece of advice. It's like
Mhm.
every time I've let go of a function inside the agency and let somebody else take over and be responsible for it, we've grown again. And
Yeah.
I would do that much sooner on in my career. I'm at that stage now where I don't have any direct responsibilities for departments now, just focus on vision and growth and dealing with my COO and the directors and VPs and stuff. But I made that mistake for too many years, is holding on to different things: sales, client services, finance. You've been down that road. You understand.
Yeah. It takes us a long time. We don't think anybody can do what we're doing as good as us. And that's actually a mistake because we're doing 1,000 things. Now, if we were just
Yeah.
focusing on one thing, I could be like, all right, well, maybe. But then I always tell people, and I always try to figure out, I'm like, what do they need to know in order for them to get to 80% if I was only doing this 100%?
Yeah.
And then what I realized, I'm like, man, if you hire the right people, like I always joke about this on the podcast, is like, I'm a horrible manager. I don't want to manage anybody. I want people to be able to manage them themselves. Now, the whole company is not that way, but if they're reporting to me, I can't, I don't have, I can't manage them. So they need to be self-managing. And then for the people, on the lower levels of your agency, hire people that can manage, that are
Yeah.
good at that, and have
Yeah.
patience, which we don't.
Well, I'm very similar to you in that respect. And that served me well lately, is having great team members, great managers on the team, and picking up the slack where I'm not so good in those departments.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on the show. Sorry it took us so long. I'm glad you reached out to come on the show. I always tell everybody, if you've been listening to the show for years, reach out. I'd love to interview you guys and tell you guys' story and share with other agency owners, so you can help out other people as well. So thanks so much for coming on the show. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed this and you want to learn some of the hard things faster, right? I always hear a lot of people are like, man, if I could just go back a couple of years ago and just do this, I would be so much further along, or I could have avoided this. That's why we created the agency mastermind, to put you in a very small room of amazing agency owners that all think the way we think, that want to help, that are transparent, and growing and doing some really cool things. If you want to be in that room, reach out to us. Go to agencymastery.io. And until next time, have a swank day. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.